Arthur, a 23-year-old young man, is a natural-born seducer and a shrewd opportunist. His beauty, accentuated by a charming smile and mischievous, sparkling eyes, along with his undeniable charisma, are his primary weapons for winning hearts. He has always had the knack for turning heads and captivating minds, using his charm to navigate fleeting relationships and casual conquests. However, this time, he has set his sights much higher than just a romantic fling. He has targeted a much more lucrative prize. When he meets Madeline, an elegant and wealthy 70-year-old woman, Arthur sees a golden opportunity. Her slender figure, carefully coiffed silver hair, and distinguished demeanor speak of a life of luxury and privilege. To him, Madeline is not just an older woman but a ticket to fortune. Arthur makes it his mission to seduce her, convinced that once they are married, he can quickly get his hands on her wealth. Arthur begins to devise a meticulous plan. He observes Madeline during her outings to art galleries and high society events, learning her tastes and preferences. He soon starts showering her with skillful compliments, praising her sense of style and sharp mind. Each encounter is carefully orchestrated to make Madeline feel desired and dependent on him. He displays a delicate attentiveness, listening intently to her stories of travel and youth, while ensuring he reveals just enough vulnerability to tug at her heartstrings. Arthur envisions himself living in a world of luxury and opulence, a universe where every whim is effortlessly fulfilled. He imagines being surrounded by material possessions he could never afford before, luxury watches, high-end clothing, and lavish residences. He dreams of glamorous evenings in Michelin-starred restaurants where the servers know him by name, with champagne flowing freely. First-class trips to exotic destinations, private beaches, and five-star hotel suites become his fantasy of regular escapades. The life he craves is one of the elite, where financial worries are replaced by endless comfort. To Arthur, Madeline represents the key to this ideal existence. He no longer sees her merely as an older woman, but as the gateway to a life he never thought possible. As his plan unfolds, he refines his strategies, doubling down on his seduction with thoughtful gestures and flattering words to ensure Madeline falls deeper under his spell. Arthur becomes a master of feigning love, intertwining his false affections with just enough sincerity to make them seem authentic. Madeline, however, is far from naive. Beneath her silver hair and understated elegance lies a sharp mind and a lifetime of experience that only a woman of her age and background could possess. At 70, she has weathered many trials and triumphs, passionate loves, and bitter disappointments. She has navigated complex relationships, met men of all kinds, and learned to discern true intentions behind charming smiles. Arthur, with his youthful allure and saccharine manners, is no mystery to her. Although she is flattered by his attention, Madeline quickly recognizes that Arthur's motivations are far from noble. In his gaze, gestures, and words, she sees the false devotion of a man chasing something far more material than her affection. His intentions, dressed in counterfeit tenderness, are as clear as day to her. He desires her fortune, not her heart. Rather than feeling betrayed or immediately rejecting Arthur, Madeline decides to play the game on her own terms. Armed with her experience and intuition, she does not react like a woman easily duped. On the contrary, she chooses to enjoy this unexpected situation by testing the limits of the overly confident young man. If Arthur thinks he can manipulate her with ease, he is sorely mistaken. Madeline already has a plan of her own. She observes him with a calm, almost benevolent gaze, pretending to overlook his true intentions. But every smile and sweet word she offers is meticulously calculated. Madeline acts gentle and attentive, subtly steering the relationship exactly where she wants it to go. She lets him believe he is in control while, in reality, she is the one orchestrating this ambiguous relationship. She grants him meetings in lavish settings, engages in conversations about the future, and plays up the fragility her age might suggest, all while maintaining complete control over the situation. But that's not all. Behind this game of seduction, Madeline begins to develop a fascinating curiosity about Arthur. Why would a young man, in the prime of his life, turn to her? Is he solely driven by greed, or is there something deeper drawing him to her, a subconscious desire for maternal approval or an emotional void he seeks to fill? With her wisdom, Madeline relishes the enigma that is Arthur, a mix of vulnerability and opportunism. She decides to push his limits. During their dinners, she shares stories of her past, extraordinary adventures, challenges she has overcome, loves she has cherished and lost. She watches his reactions closely, trying to see beyond the mask he wears. Is he truly capable of feeling, or is he merely an actor in a play he believes he controls? Each day, she drops subtle hints, little probing remarks, to see how far Arthur is willing to go to maintain his illusion. Through this game of cat and mouse, the question looms, who will ultimately outsmart whom? Arthur, with his youthful ambition and cunning plans, or Madeline, with her decades of experience and hidden agenda? But Madeline had another plan, far more cunning. While letting him believe he was getting closer to his goal, she discreetly took steps to protect her assets. She consulted her lawyer, reviewed her wills and investments, and moved her finances out of his reach. Far from being a passive victim, she prepared for the moment when Arthur would realize that everything he hoped for was nothing more than an illusion. She envisioned, with a certain satisfaction, the day the truth would come to light, forcing Arthur to confront reality. She would never be the easy prey he thought he could conquer. And so, the game continued. Madeline, with her wisdom and composure, allowed Arthur to sink deeper into his own trap, while savoring the irony of the situation. As he believed himself to be closing in on his objective, she secretly relished the moment she would reveal her true intentions, turning this game of seduction into a life lesson Arthur would never forget. As Arthur and Madeline spent more time together, Arthur's strategy grew more elaborate. He had meticulously studied every detail of Madeline's life, from the artworks adorning her walls to the passionate discussions she led at the charity galas she presided over. He knew that to fully win her over and lower her defenses, he needed to play the role of a devoted lover. He began to adopt attentive, even seemingly sincere behavior. He accompanied her to her philanthropic engagements, lent a listening ear to her stories about the causes she cared deeply about, and suddenly developed an interest in her passions, such as girls' education and the fight against poverty. As time passed, Arthur felt an increasing need to solidify his relationship with Madeline. He was aware that she was not an easy woman to deceive, but he believed that his charm and patience would eventually lead her to where he wanted, down the aisle, with a substantial share of her fortune within his grasp. With this goal in mind, he devised his boldest plan yet, the marriage proposal. One evening, while dining at a chic restaurant perched atop a skyscraper with a breathtaking view of the city, Arthur felt that the moment had finally arrived. Everything seemed perfect, the dim lighting, flickering candles, soft piano music in the background, and the elegant atmosphere. He had ensured every detail contributed to a romantic and unforgettable setting. Slowly rising from his chair, he took a deep breath to steady his excitement and anxiety. The words he was about to say had to be carefully chosen, each syllable calculated to stir Madeline's emotions without leaving room for doubt. Madeline, he began softly, taking her delicate hand in his gaze locked on hers. I know our story may seem unexpected to many, but for me, it has become inevitable. I can no longer ignore what I feel for you. You are the most incredible woman I have ever met. Your strength, grace, and wisdom inspire me every day. His words were delivered with measured tenderness, calculated to strike the right chord. Arthur knew he needed to play the authenticity card. His tone was humble yet confident, as if confessing feelings he could no longer suppress. I want to spend the rest of my life cherishing you, honoring you, and being the man you deserve. Madeline listened attentively, her eyes fixed on him, though her expression remained unreadable. Intrigued, she felt a mix of interest and suspicion. She knew Arthur might be sincere, but she was equally aware of his ambitions. She let him speak, curious to see how far he was willing to go. Sensing the opportunity, Arthur continued, confident that he had captured her attention. I love you, Madeline, and I'm ready to commit fully. I want you to be my wife so we can build a future together, not just for ourselves but to continue doing great things for others. Together, imagine what we could accomplish. Your intelligence and generosity combined with my dedication, we would be an unstoppable force. Then, in a theatrical gesture he had carefully rehearsed, Arthur pulled out a small velvet box from his pocket. He opened it slowly, revealing a sparkling diamond ring that glistened under the dim light. The jewel's brilliance reflected in the soft glow, accentuating the stone's dazzling beauty. "Will you marry me?" he asked, his eyes fixed on Madeline, hoping to elicit a favorable response. A silence fell over the table, the moment suspended in time. Madeline's gaze dropped briefly to the ring before returning to meet Arthur's. She studied his every move, every inflection in his voice. She had seen much in her life, experienced both sincere love and cunning betrayals, and what she saw in Arthur at that moment stirred more questions than answers. She smiled softly, but behind that smile lay intense contemplation. Madeline knew this was a crucial moment, not only for Arthur, but also for herself. She could expose him now or play the cautious card, continuing to explore the complex game they were both engaged in. "Arthur," Madeline responded with an enigmatic smile, her piercing gaze cutting through Arthur's pretenses. "I'm flattered by your proposal. But before I give you a definitive answer, there's something you need to understand." She paused, savoring the impact of her words. "Love isn't measured by money or material possessions. It is built on sincerity, mutual respect, and the depth of feelings. That's why I'm proposing a challenge." Arthur, who had believed everything was unfolding according to his plans, felt a slight wave of uncertainty wash over him. A challenge? This wasn't what he had anticipated. Nevertheless, he remained silent, ready to hear what Madeline had to say. "For 1 year," she continued, "immerse yourself fully in my life. Share my passions, engage in my philanthropic endeavors, and truly understand what matters most to me. If, at the end of that year, you still feel the same love, if you can prove that your feelings are genuine, then I will be ready to consider a life together. But not before." Madeline's words echoed in Arthur's mind. A year? That was far more than he had envisioned. He had thought he could win Madeline over in a matter of months, perhaps even weeks, and then enjoy a life of luxury. However, the prospect of a substantial inheritance, though delayed, did not deter him. He knew that a year by her side, if he played his cards right, could be a profitable investment. He smiled, skillfully masking his surprise behind a facade of devotion. "All right, Madeline," he replied after a moment of reflection, his tone filled with determination. "I'll gladly take on this challenge. I'm ready to prove that my love for you is real and that what we can build together goes far beyond appearances." Madeline smiled, but behind that smile was a subtle satisfaction. She knew this year would be decisive, not just for him but for herself as well. She wasn't naive about Arthur's intentions, and if she had accepted this challenge, it was for a very specific reason. Throughout her life, she had witnessed people trying to manipulate her, to take advantage of her wealth or status. But she had never been as aware of someone's true motivations as she was with Arthur. She was letting him play his game, but she already had a plan in mind. As Arthur, confident, became consumed by his ambitions for wealth and prestige, Madeline was preparing to teach him a lesson he would never forget. Over the course of the year, she would scrutinize his every move, his reactions, his motivations. She would test his values, his patience, and above all, his capacity for sincerity. Deep down, Madeline knew one thing. If Arthur failed this challenge, he would reveal far more about himself than he ever anticipated. The game had just begun, but Madeline controlled the rules with an almost imperceptible mastery. She directed every move with subtle elegance, never forcing the issue. However, Arthur, intelligent and adaptable, quickly adjusted to the complex terrain. He accepted the challenge with cold determination, fully aware that this year would be pivotal. He knew he had to win Madeline over completely, and more importantly, secure her fortune. Playing the role of the devoted lover, he learned to read every emotion on her face, interpret her slightest gestures, and anticipate her desires before she voiced them. He immersed himself in her causes as if they had always been his own, discovering in her charitable works a new facet of his ambition. During this critical year, Arthur became more than just a companion. He was a pillar at Madeline's side. He accompanied her to social events, involved himself in the management of her affairs with disarming efficiency, and displayed exquisite kindness, meticulously calculated. He played the role of the ideal partner to perfection, attentive and thoughtful. Gradually, he noticed Madeline lowering her guard. Her eyes, once filled with suspicion, softened when they met his. She seemed more at ease in his presence, sharing laughter and confidences with newfound lightness. She began to trust him, little by little, almost in spite of herself. And Arthur, ever shrewd, knew his plan was unfolding flawlessly. Yet a shadow began to cloud his thoughts. While he remained focused on his initial goal, to gain wealth and secure his position through Madeline's fortune, he could not ignore the conflicting feelings that began to emerge within him. The more time he spent with her, the more he discovered the depth of her character. Madeline, who at first had been nothing more than prey to him, revealed qualities that unsettled him. She wasn't just the wealthy woman he had believed he could manipulate. She possessed a subtle wisdom, a delicate sense of humor, and an irresistible charisma. Her conversations, her involuntary gestures of tenderness, everything awakened in Arthur a genuine admiration, almost embarrassing in its sincerity. He found himself enjoying their time together, seeking her smiles not out of strategy, but out of desire. He tried to push these intrusive thoughts aside, constantly reminding himself to stay the course. But doubt began to creep in. What if, despite all his preparation, he was actually falling for Madeline for real? A year later, the long-awaited day arrived, the day Madeline had promised to make her decision. Arthur, outwardly calm, felt a wave of excitement rising within him as he prepared. Madeline's invitation had brought him to her private estate, a picturesque manor nestled by the sea. Every detail of the residence exuded understated elegance, a testament to the wealth and class she embodied. When he passed through the imposing doors, a butler greeted him with courtesy and guided him through the manor to a terrace garden overlooking the ocean. The sound of waves crashing against the rocks below set the rhythm of the serene late afternoon. The sun, slowly sinking on the horizon, cast a golden, almost magical glow over the scene. The sea shimmered under its light, creating a dreamlike tableau. Madeline stood there, dressed in a white gown that seemed to reflect the orange hues of the twilight. She remained motionless, arms crossed, gazing at the horizon with an unreadable expression. As Arthur joined her, she turned toward him, and he was immediately captivated by the intensity of her gaze. Her eyes shone with a restrained emotion, a mix of softness and gravity. She took a few steps toward him before stopping, close enough that their breaths mingled in the cool evening air. "Arthur," she began softly, her voice tinged with an unusual sincerity, "we've spent a year together, and you've faced my challenge with grace and patience. You've been there every moment, even when I didn't expect it. You understood my silences, and I've seen in you far more than I anticipated." She paused, letting her words hang between them, suspended in the air. Arthur felt his heartbeat quicken. He had worked hard to reach this moment. Every word, every gesture, every shared moment with Madeline had been a carefully placed piece of the puzzle. He knew that Madeline's fortune was now just within his grasp. His patience, strategy, and dedication had paid off. "I never thought this would happen," Madeline continued, her eyes locking onto his, "but I feel truly close to you now." Her gaze softened with unexpected tenderness. "You've managed to win my heart, Arthur." At those words, a sense of triumph surged within Arthur. Everything had gone exactly as planned. Madeline, the independent and elusive woman, had finally chosen him. All that remained was to seal the commitment, and everything she owned, her estate, her wealth, her fortune, would become his as well. "I think it's time to take the next step," she said, her voice gaining a solemn gravity. Arthur held his breath. The decisive moment was finally here. "I'm ready to marry you." A smile spread across Arthur's face, but at that precise moment, as he prepared to respond, a fleeting doubt crossed his mind. Was this truly the triumph he had envisioned? Memories of the past year flashed before him, moments of genuine connection, shared laughter, deep conversations under starry skies. He had grown close to Madeline not only for what she represented materially, but also, perhaps, because she had become something more than just a goal. But he quickly dismissed the feeling. This was no time for hesitation. The opportunity of a lifetime stood before him, and he couldn't afford to waver. They planned an intimate wedding imbued with understated luxury in that very same garden overlooking the ocean. The naturally beautiful setting was transformed into a fairy tale scene. Delicate floral garlands in soft pastel tones adorned every corner. Arches covered in white roses and ivy framed the space with elegance, while chandeliers suspended from tree branches cast a soft glow as twilight settled. The air was filled with the fragrance of lilies and orchids, creating an enchanting atmosphere. The guests, carefully selected, belonged to the elite of society, dressed impeccably. This small circle of attendees included influential business figures, renowned artists, and close friends, all speaking in hushed tones, captivated by the simple yet grand beauty of the ceremony unfolding before them. Arthur, dressed in a tailored black suit, walked with quiet confidence through the rows of cream velvet chairs arranged on the immaculate lawn. Every step resonated with the satisfaction of a man reaching his goal. His impeccable appearance and calculated smile made him irresistible. He exchanged polite greetings without ever taking his eyes off the end of the aisle, where Madeline would soon appear. And when Madeline made her entrance, the murmurs of the guests immediately ceased. She was radiant. Her cream satin gown, simple yet sublime, draped her figure with grace. The flowing fabric moved lightly with each step, glimmering softly under the last rays of sunlight. A delicate veil partially covered her hair, offering a glimpse of her shining eyes and radiant smile. Her serene expression exuded a quiet confidence, as if this moment was the natural culmination of their story. Madeline walked toward Arthur, her gaze fixed on him, and for the first time, an emotion deeper than simple satisfaction struck him. The image he had of her, so composed and calculating in his eyes, suddenly blurred. He no longer saw her as an objective to achieve, but as a woman of rare elegance, a woman who had chosen to intertwine her fate with his. The ceremony itself was both simple and sumptuous, orchestrated with flawless precision. The priest, dressed in a modest robe, stood beneath an arch of flowers, waiting for the couple's arrival with an almost solemn serenity. The words exchanged were brief but powerful, resonating with the gravity of the commitment they were making. As they spoke their vows, the sea behind them seemed to respond with the gentle rustling of its waves. The sun, now low in the sky, bathed the scene in golden light, illuminating the tears of a few emotional guests. Arthur, holding Madeline's hands, felt an unexpected warmth rise within him. He repeated the priest's words with confidence, yet a part of him remained silently unsettled by the intensity of the moment. Madeline, for her part, appeared more assured than ever, her sparkling eyes fixed on his, promising far more than a mere material union. When the priest finally uttered the sacred words, "You may kiss the bride," Arthur leaned in, overcome by the emotion of the moment. The kiss was soft, almost solemn, as the guests applauded. Flower petals thrown into the air swirled around them, creating a dreamlike image, as though the universe itself celebrated their union. The evening that followed was equally elegant. Under a vast silk marquee adorned with crystal chandeliers and flickering candles, a lavish dinner was served. One refined dish after another graced the table, with every detail of the reception designed to impress. Now officially bound to Madeline, Arthur raised a toast, his gaze sweeping the room with an almost palpable satisfaction. He had achieved everything he had ever wanted, or so he thought. And yet, as he watched Madeline laugh heartily, surrounded by their guests, a strange thought crossed his mind. What if this marriage, which had once been purely a game of strategy for him, was becoming something more real, more profound than he had ever anticipated? In the months that followed, Arthur felt invincible, as though he had reached the pinnacle of his ambitions. He was now Madeline's husband, a woman whose wealth and influence far exceeded even his wildest dreams of success. Their daily lives were an uninterrupted parade of luxury. Arthur reveled in all that Madeline possessed: a palatial estate with classic architecture, luxury cars lined up in a sprawling driveway, and rare artworks displayed on the walls like trophies. Each morning, he woke in silk sheets, surrounded by breathtaking decor, and each evening was marked by opulent dinners or grand receptions where he mingled with the crème de la crème of society. Arthur thrived in this new world. He was now the center of attention, attending the most exclusive social events, rubbing shoulders with business tycoons, influential politicians, and A-list celebrities. At galas and charity receptions, he shone by Madeline's side, who continued to play the role of the elegant, admired woman. Photographers captured every moment, and their names frequently appeared in luxury magazines. To the world, they were the perfect couple, united by love and success. For Arthur, it was the ultimate victory. He had won Madeline, gained unlimited access to her fortune, and entered the elite circle of global high society. Yet, despite all the luxury and social recognition, a vague sense of unease began to creep into his mind, though he pushed it aside with determination. He believed he had won, but subtle details started to awaken a strange suspicion within him. Madeline, though always gracious and smiling, had a peculiar way of managing things. Arthur, who thought he had taken control of their union, began to realize that Madeline maintained a discreet yet undeniable grip on every aspect of their shared life. She controlled the finances, oversaw every major decision, and even when she consulted him, it was often she who ultimately made the final call. One day, while they were discussing a significant investment in a real estate project, Arthur proposed an ambitious idea, confident that his perspective would be enthusiastically received. But Madeline, after listening attentively, smiled softly and politely declined his suggestion, opting for another direction. To his surprise, Arthur had no choice but to yield to her decision, as everything, from bank accounts to financial partnerships, was under her control. It was subtle but undeniable. Madeline always had the final say. It was then that Arthur realized that, although he was married to Madeline, he had never truly taken control. Everything he had thought he had mastered was, in fact, an illusion. Madeline was playing a much more complex game, one in which she remained the true mistress of the cards. She had let him believe that he had won, but in reality, she had never lost control. A few months after their marriage, Arthur found himself eagerly awaiting an event he dared not name, an incident that could potentially change his life. He hoped that Madeline would fall ill or disappear, leaving the door wide open to her fortune and the possibility of leading the lavish life he had always dreamed of. In his mind, he had woven a scenario where he became the tragic hero, the widower grieving the loss of his beautiful wife, while rubbing his hands at the thought of the wealth that would be his. However, the weeks went by, and contrary to all expectations, Madeline seemed in perfect health, more radiant and energetic than ever. Her days were filled with meetings, philanthropy, and social events where she shone brightly. She was active, busy, her vitality overflowing, and her enthusiasm contagious. Arthur watched her thrive in her role as wife and businesswoman, and it troubled him more than he admitted. Every time he saw her laugh out loud at dinners or parties, a growing sense of frustration and despair filled him. His dreams of quick wealth clashed with the reality of an insatiable Madeline, committed to pursuing her projects with a passion Arthur had underestimated. She already had several ongoing projects, investments that promised enormous returns, and each new success only enhanced her aura. In moments of solitude, Arthur gave way to dark thoughts. He wondered if he had chosen the wrong path, the one that led him to slowly consume himself in his own greed. He had worked hard to build a perfect facade, but inside, resentment and jealousy were eating him away. He felt increasingly like an intruder in Madeline's life, a man taking advantage of the generosity of a woman who, despite her sweet appearance, possessed a strength and determination that far surpassed his. The situation reached a critical point during a charity gala held in Madeline's honor. It was a prestigious event, gathering influential figures from the business and cultural worlds. The room was tastefully decorated, sparkling chandeliers illuminating the smiling faces of the guests. As Arthur watched his wife, dressed in a sumptuous black velvet gown that highlighted her slender figure, he felt more and more insignificant. She was the star of the evening, the heroine of her own story, while he remained a mere extra in the shadows. During the evening, Madeline took the floor to present a sustainable development project she was supporting, passionate about the positive impact it could have on the community. She captivated the audience with her charisma, her words resonating with such conviction that the guests hung on her every word. Arthur, however, felt a rise of anger and helplessness. She shone with a brilliance he had never known how to spark in himself, and it was a blow to his ego. The enthusiasm and admiration of the guests for Madeline only heightened his own sense of failure. Deep down, the thought of inheriting her fortune seemed more and more outdated. Arthur knew he couldn't continue hoping for misfortune to advance in his life. Yet, he couldn't help but fantasize about solutions, ways to speed up the process. But as these dark thoughts emerged, he also felt a strange guilt, an inner voice whispering that he was losing himself in his own ambitions. At the end of the evening, as they headed home, Arthur hesitated to bring up the subject with Madeline. He felt a gap had formed between them. She, with her liveliness and determination, seemed like a shooting star, while he sank deeper into the shadows, consumed by thoughts of betrayal and despair. "Arthur, what's wrong?" she asked, her voice soft, as they sat in the car. He hesitated for a moment, then forced himself to smile. "Nothing, my dear. Just a little tired, I think." But deep down, he knew that something had to change. Either he would rediscover an authentic passion for the life they shared, or he risked being consumed by dark ambitions that would lead to his own ruin. Months passed, but the truth was that the only person he could really blame was himself. Madeline didn't seem ready to hand over control, and he increasingly felt like time was slipping through his fingers, along with his dreams of inheritance. A few years after their marriage, when routine had settled in and Arthur believed he had mastered his destiny, Madeline, as usual, invited him to an important meeting with her financial advisors. They were seated in her office, an elegant and bright space, surrounded by neatly stacked files and abstract paintings decorating the walls, reflecting her refined taste. Arthur, still drunk on his success and his status as the husband of an influential woman, paid little attention to what was being said around him, distracted by thoughts of personal glory and future projects. However, everything changed in an instant. As the notary flipped through some documents, a heavy silence filled the room. Arthur didn't immediately notice the exchanged glances between the advisors. It was when the notary uttered those words that chilled his blood that he suddenly came back to reality. "Under the will of Madame Madeline, drafted even before your marriage, the entirety of her fortune, her properties, investments, and jewelry will be transferred to her humanitarian foundation upon her death," he explained in a neutral tone, his serene smile contrasting with the storm brewing in Arthur's mind. "As for you, sir, a modest annuity has been arranged, more than sufficient to maintain a comfortable lifestyle, but with no claim on her assets." At that moment, Arthur felt the ground slip away from under him. Every word echoed in his mind like a gong, hammering the cruel truth he had tried to avoid. He instantly realized that he had been deceived, trapped in a game far larger than the one he thought he was playing. All his schemes, his hopes for wealth, his sneaky ambition, it had all been an illusion. Madeline had always known. She had anticipated his plan from the start and had crafted each step of their relationship to lead to this very moment. Arthur's world was collapsing around him, each piece of the puzzle falling into place in a nightmarish vision. The lively dinners where he thought he was shining, the gala nights where he felt powerful, all of it was merely a carefully orchestrated backdrop to hide the truth. He was just an actor in the theater of his life. Madeline, with her intelligence and foresight, had woven a web he would never control. His gaze fell on Madeline, sitting next to him, looking calm and serene, listening to the notary with feigned attention. Her soft smile and tranquil confidence reminded him just how far ahead of him she had always been. Arthur felt a wave of rage and frustration rise within him. How could he have been so naive? How could he have thought he could manipulate such a shrewd woman? The notary's words continued to reverberate in his mind. Modest annuity. It sent him back to a life he had so feared, the life of a man dependent on his wife's generosity, a man who would never touch the true wealth he desired. His mind boiled, thoughts spinning between anger and humiliation. He stood up abruptly, drawing the attention of the advisors. "You can't do this," he stammered, his voice trembling. "I deserve better than this. After all I've given to this relationship." His tone, though firm, betrayed deep anxiety. Madeline turned to him, her piercing gaze cutting through the mask he was trying to maintain. "Arthur, I've always respected you," she replied softly, but with chilling clarity. "But I never wanted our marriage to be based on financial interests. I married you because I believed in us, not because I wanted you to inherit my fortune. My legacy is meant for something greater." This statement, though laced with sincerity, only fueled the resentment Arthur had buried so deeply. "You manipulated me," he spat, emotions overflowing from his control. "It was all a plan to exclude me." The advisors exchanged worried glances, but Madeline remained unyielding. "If you feel that way, it's perhaps because you never truly understood who I am. I thought you could see beyond money, but it seems I was wrong." Arthur realized then that he was not only losing a fortune, but also a part of himself. The illusions he had built around their marriage were crumbling like a house of cards. The pain of this revelation struck him harder than any material disappointment. Madeline, seated beside him, gave him a gentle, almost maternal look. "Arthur, I let you play your game because I believed you could learn something from this experience. And maybe somewhere you've changed a little. But it's important you understand that wealth does not define love. What we share is far more precious than any sum of money." Arthur, stunned, could find no words to respond. Every word from Madeline was like a whip, resonating in his mind with disarming clarity. He had spent an entire year trying to deceive Madeline, playing a role that, in the end, had slipped from his grasp. It was she who, in the end, had given him a lesson he would never forget. A lesson about the value of human relationships, authenticity, and true intimacy. Arthur realized that he was not just losing a fortune, but also a part of himself, a part he had neglected in favor of his material ambitions. The illusions he had built around their marriage were falling apart like a house of cards, leaving behind an uncomfortable, raw truth. The pain of this revelation struck him harder than any material disappointment. He left the office, his heart heavy and his mind in turmoil. The corridors of the manor, once filled with glamour and splendor, now felt oppressive. The walls adorned with happy memories seemed dark and melancholic, and he wondered what he could do now to right the ship. Did he really need the money to validate his worth? The question haunted him, echoing in his mind like a persistent echo. He realized he had been trapped by his own desires, locked in a quest for external recognition that had led him away from his essence. As he walked slowly, lost in his thoughts, memories of a simpler life returned to him. Moments when he laughed without worrying about money or status, times of pure happiness shared with sincere friends, and genuine laughter. These memories brought him a certain clarity. Perhaps the real challenge wasn't to seize Madeline's wealth, but rather to reassess his own values and reconnect with what truly mattered. The daylight filtered through the large windows, casting shadows on the marble floor, and Arthur paused for a moment to contemplate the view. The garden, full of blooming flowers, seemed to reflect his own life, beautiful, yet needing care and attention to thrive. The moment felt both liberating and frightening, as though he stood on the edge of a precipice, ready to jump into the unknown. He resumed walking, determined to face this difficult reality. Perhaps what he needed to do now was learn to appreciate the small things in life, to develop genuine passions, and to cultivate deep relationships. He needed to rediscover himself, reevaluate his goals, and decide what he truly wanted. As he returned to his room, Arthur took a deep breath, promising himself not to let resentment or envy consume him. Instead, he would choose to invest in his own growth. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but he understood that he now had the opportunity to become the man he had always wanted to be, free from the illusions of wealth and power. He leaned out of the window, watching the ocean waves crash against the shore. In their movement, he found a metaphor for his own life, a continuous cycle of challenges and renewal, acceptance and growth. He realized that he needed to face his fears, set aside his thirst for power, and embrace the path of change. This moment of clarity gave him the strength he needed to face the challenges ahead. Rather than seeing his marriage as a battleground for fortune, he would start to see Madeline as a partner, a collaborator. He wanted to learn from her, not to manipulate or profit, but to build something truly solid, founded on love and mutual respect. In this new mindset, he became aware that true wealth lay in shared experiences, laughter, tears, and the memories created together. By reinventing himself, Arthur also hoped to bring a new dimension to their relationship, one that went far beyond material concerns. Thus, a new determination was born within him. The future was no longer a land of anxiety, but a vast ocean of possibilities, where each wave represented a new opportunity for reinvention.